Today, I'd like to continue our journey through the book of Deuteronomy and take a look today at chapter 25 of that book as we follow some of the laws that the Jewish people decided were good for their community, would be very helpful for them. One of the laws they came up with was when there is a decision about a dispute between two men. So, two men are involved in a dispute. It could be over property, it could be over something to do with a stealing situation where somebody thought maybe they stole something. Whatever the dispute might be, the guilty party, when they're found to be guilty in the dispute, so when they go to the judges, who generally speaking were religious leaders in the community who were appointed to oversee disputes. And when that would happen and somebody was determined to be guilty, like maybe they actually stole some property or they stole an important animal, an ox or some sheep from somebody, or did some damage to somebody else's residence, that type of situation. When that would happen, they would receive no more than 40 stripes. So if they were guilty, just to kind of discourage them from doing it again as a deterrent aspect, to set an example before the rest of the community, they were given the 40 stripes. Interestingly enough, that 40 stripes was later on reduced to 39 stripes. And the idea was that they wanted to make sure the person was punished adequately, but not so severely that it could cause death. So this was not a situation where they wanted to kill somebody. They just wanted to send a message to that person that you've done wrong. We don't want that to happen again. We want to protect our community and keep our community safe. Also, very importantly, was the animals and how animals were treated. And one of the laws they came up with was you shall not muzzle an ox when it is treading out grain. So when that ox is doing something very important for the farmer, when they're helping with the grain harvest and treading out the grain, they should not be muzzled at that point. The idea was to make sure that that animal was treated well and respectfully. Animals were very important for the economic well-being of the community, and it was important that they were treated correctly, important for feeding the people, important for helping the people and developing the property of the people. So animals were treated with a great deal of respect. Now, also when brothers live together, when they hold property in common, and one of them dies without a son. So they have this property together. Usually the property went to the oldest son, but in some situations the brothers would hold the property in common together. And one of the brothers dies, there is no son. Now, the widow of the deceased shall not marry anyone outside the family. It's very important to keep everything within the family. The husband's brother shall marry her, and the firstborn son from this marriage shall continue in the line of the deceased brother. So very important to keep those lines together, and to make sure that that firstborn son was always honored. That was the tradition. And so the widow of the deceased would marry within the family, and the husband's brother is the one who would marry her. But the firstborn son from that marriage is then the one who would continue in the line. And it makes sense to keep that line going. Very important that the property be kept within the family. Again, you can get into various disputes that we have even today over wills and who's going to get the property and who's going to get the best share and all of that. And it goes back and forth. And it can create a lot of resentment within the family. So in order to avoid that, it was laid out very clearly that the firstborn son, the rights would go to that person. And very important that there was no damage done to others within the family. And it kind of help to keep the family intact. Now, inevitably in those situations, obviously there'd be some jealousy, but since it was understood that this was the pattern, this was kept as the law for the people. Now, what if he refuses to marry her? Which could turn out, for whatever reason, he doesn't want to marry her. Then she would go to the elders in the community, and the elders would be those that would be appointed to oversee the disputes, like the earlier dispute about two parties and property, and who would be the guilty party. So these elders would oversee that, and they would admonish him. They would say, no, you must marry her. We must keep this property within the family. We don't want to destroy these relationships. You should marry her. And the elders would strip his sandal from his foot, and they would spit in his face if he persists. And the sister-in-law would be the one who would go up to him in the presence of the elders, and would kind of embarrass him by taking the sandal off from his foot, spitting in his face. That would be the punishment. This is how one should be treated who will not build up the brother's family. So the idea was this would be a very embarrassing thing for the widow to do. So it would get the brother to relent and to do the right thing. That was the concept before it. And the elders, of course, would reinforce this and say, no, you must marry her. Now, when two men are fighting, and the wife of one intervenes to save her husband from the blows of the other man, and if she seizes his private parts, her hand should be chopped off without pity. So again, you can see how this situation might develop. The two men are fighting, and the wife is very upset about this, and she intervenes, and in order to stop the fight, she grabs the private parts of the person. Well, this is not good. This is very embarrassing, very harmful, should not be done, humiliation. And so her hand is chopped off. And again, this might seem like a severe punishment, but again, the concept was to protect the community, keep the community safe, and make sure that these types of incidents did not happen. And also, you should not keep two different weights in your bag, one large and the other small, nor two different measures. Make sure your measures and weights are true. Very important in an agrarian economy. When you're weighing out things and charging money for it, a lot of times people would have like a certain weight that they would put in, and it would be heavier, and it would then cost more money. Again, what it comes down to is cheating. You're not getting an accurate measurement. You're not being fair to the person who is buying the grain, and so this is not a good thing, and this would not be allowed. So don't keep those two different weights in your pocket or two different measures. And then chapter 25 ends with the idea of not forgetting how the people were treated when they were in Egypt by the Amalekites. The Amalekites were, of course, the rival tribe, and they did not treat the Jewish people very well. So the idea was to remember that, to remember how you were treated. A lot of times you get into situations where this happened years ago. They're saying, be careful. Certain people treated you in the past. This could come back to haunt you. And so be careful in the way that you treat them as well. So we can see that these laws that we're looking at in chapter 25, what are they intended for? Really to keep the community safe and to make sure that everyone knows their part and everyone knows what is right and what is wrong and what path they should follow.